Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa bihi nasta'in. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second session of Islamic Finance 101. I'm speaking from the international KL International Airport, Terminal 2, upon my arrival from another destination. So my apology for keep you waiting, and as you know that the second session today will be very much focusing on an expectation and inspiration by some segment in Islamic finance industry, that Islamic banking or Islamic bank in particular should be different from a conventional bank. Before I proceed further discussing about this topic, I would like to pick up from the last session two outstanding questions from the audience at large. One of them was asking me whether sale and trading or tijarah is the same thing. From my perspective, though the Quran has mentioned about sale contract in the nomenclature of al-bay', but the right understanding of al-bay' from the Arabic lexicon, as well as in the Quranic tafsir, it shouldn't be limited to a sale contract, because a sale contract would cover a bigger coverage of any trading transaction. So you may call sale is equivalent to trading, and at the same time equivalent to tijarah. In fact, the Quran mentioned about tijarah in Surah Al-Imran to reinforce our understanding that sale would include any form of trading transaction. Interestingly, in this modern world, people are perhaps confused the difference between trading and investment. Again, from my own understanding and perspective, everything in this world must be ended up with trading. Though you are setting up your company, you go for IPO, listing, and private company, at the end of the day, everyone must be able to sell his product or his services, because it's not good enough to become a big company providing good services, but you cannot sell the product and services to the whole market. Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and airline operators, they are selling the product, and that's why the Quran is so beautiful in describing that the solution to riba is trading, because everything must end up by selling something to some segment of the society. How beautiful the Quranic term of al-bay' has been in the case of describing the whole activities of human and community in terms of sale, ijarah, leasing, as well as setting up the company to produce goods and services to be sold to the entire world. The second question from the last session, someone was asking about that Islamic banking could be deemed or perceived as a backdoor to interest, because net the effect will be the same. And even some scholars, some thinkers, they have been saying that the current system that we have is nothing but a mirror image of conventional banks, and Islamic bank do not do anything but to mimic some of the aspect. Many people got trapped in this understanding. Unfortunately, some scholars, some thinkers in the society are being trapped in the same issue without understanding that Islamic bank, though they have the same products, having the same economic benefit of the product, but the way they do things is different from conventional. Being similar does not mean they are similar in terms of the DNA, the requirement, the compliant oversight and whatnot. So this is a good prelude to my session today to see whether becoming similar to one another would make the two similar in all aspects. So this is a topic which is our focus for today's session. Coming back to the topic, and I have to praise it properly, that some writers, some thinkers, some researchers in the past 40 years or 30 years, they have been saying that, they have not been saying clearly enough, but they have been hinting that Islamic bank should be different from a commercial bank. It's either 100% different or to some extent different from the conventional bank's behavior. And this is something for me is not right, because being similar to something else does not make Islamic bank non-compliant. To give you some example, some of the thinkers and the researcher were saying that you have to be different to justify and to achieve the legitimacy of Islamic banks. Otherwise, you are still in the cocoon, in the perimeter of commercial bank. And some of them were saying worse than that. Islamic banking cannot do financial intermediary. They have to do something else. They have to do equity financing, mudaraba, musharaka, and the whole permutation of equity-based financing. Equity-based financing is compliant, but it does not make debt financing non-compliant and will not render and make the whole Islamic banking system non-Islamic or having no legitimacy to operate. And they have been saying that equity is something that would make Islamic bank different from commercial bank. So this is another theory which is very popular in the market. Of course, they have many reasons to promote the equity financing, which is part of the Islamic tradition. But to say Islamic banks without equity financing would not be legitimate and compliant is a matter of, for me, out of context and out of proportion kind of argument, because there's no solid and valid evidence to support this hypothesis. And some people, for one reason or another, they just want to see Islamic bank different from a commercial bank for whatever reason. They are, perhaps, if you like, looking into a distinction between the two to make their mind whether this is Islamic or this is not Islamic. So these are the three if you like, stream in the market. I have seen that myself. I have been engaging with some of the great mind of the scholars and thinkers and researchers on this particular three different mindset. My question to you and to everyone watching this session, before we move further, what is the epistemology that Islamic finance or Islam for that matter should be different from other systems to become compliant, to become Islamic? Of course, in some aspects and dimension of activities are neutral. The IT, the education, engineering. And when it comes to financial, we become a bit oversensitive that in the case of financial, the way we do our Islamic banks, we cannot be using debt financing, and we cannot be doing, even if you were to do debt financing, we have to take all the risks of trading. We have to be responsible for transportation, warehousing, quality control, compliant to environmental law, compliant to the custom, immigration procedures. We have to be at the port to check the procedures of bill of lading. So this is thinking has been there for many years and decades, for example, expecting and asking Islamic bank to be real traders, to be different. And the idea to be different has, for me, has diluted the very dynamic of this Islamic bank. Islamic banks must do the financial intermediary and must try to reduce the risk of becoming a real trader. Let me tell you why I'm saying that. If Islamic banks were to take the real risk from the shipping, transportation, bill of lading, quality of asset, and the implication on the consumer in terms of quality control, consumer protection, warehousing, transportation, and to build up a building, to build up the equipment, this will increase the cost of the production. Of course, the risk will be higher, and the bank has to charge higher in terms of the margin. Do you think that the 5% spread that we have seen, I mean, from 3 to 5% in the overall market condition, has been the good reflection of that risk? If the bank or bank were to take that risk, I don't think 5% would be the game of the rule of the game, because by then Islamic Bank have to put 20% and 30%, because this is the margin of a real contractor, developer, distributor and whatnot. They are taking a higher risk, and fair enough, they have to charge a higher margin of profit, again the cost of production and the cost of distribution and the cost of value chain. Islamic Bank cannot do that. We have mentioned in the last session, Islamic Bank, for one reason or another, should be focusing on financial intermediary, and if possible, investment intermediary in a limited sense, not competing with the real market. And if they were to do that, of course the risk and the margin will go up, and that will be double jeopardy to the consumers who have to pay more than the normal margin in the banking sector, which is about 3, 5, 4, 5%, the spread between the deposit and the financing asset to the bank. So this is the fact of the case. I'm more than happy to get the comment from everyone, the bankers, regulators, Sharia scholars, the thinkers, on this particular observation, because we miss the point that Islamic Bank should not be different from a commercial bank in all aspects. Of course, I have to make myself clear, Islamic Bank must be free from riba, from uncertainty in terms of quality of the product, the qualification of the product. It can be delivered, but how to deliver is something that people can negotiate. You can ask the supplier to deliver direct to the buyer, or you may ask your buyer to take delivery from the supplier direct. But the quality of the asset should be clear from Sharia perspective, free from gharar, free from gambling, speculation, and free from any non-halal goods, services and product. This is the basic requirement of making any bank a compliant bank, complying to the contract, to the principle, but not to take the real trading risk as some people would be expecting, just to be different from a commercial bank. If a commercial bank cannot or do not take the risk, then we are saying Islamic Bank should take the risk. This is a very wrong argument for no good reason from even Sharia mind, if I can say that. Worse, I have seen some of our thinkers and researchers have interpreted some of the hadith and the maxim of the Islamic commercial law to support this thesis. For example, the prophetic maxim, al-ghunmu bil-ghurmi, the risk or the profit or the yield, the income is proportionate or is in corresponding to the risk, that you have to take the risk before you can enjoy and gain the profit or the if you like the margin or the murabaha markup and whatnot. And people tend to interpret the word al-ghurmi as a risk. In fact, the word al-ghurmi cannot be defined as a risk. In fact, in other hadith, the Prophet used the word al-daman, the liability. You have to take the liability of the product, of the contractual obligation to justify the whole profit. If you are not giving the loan, you are buying and selling a commodity or a service for that matter. So you have to be liable to take some of the risk. But the Quran and the Hadith does not defy you from transferring some of the risk, or perhaps the whole risk, to the other party. And this is something that people might be saying that when you do that, you have destroyed the very fundamental of trading and thus Islamic banking perspective. So I stand to be corrected on that, and this has been my view, because Sharia would allow a trading contract even though you may transfer some and all of the risk where relevant to the other counterparties. And we're going to see some of the evidence in the Islamic literature, in our Islamic book of fiqh. ladies and gentlemen, I think my personal view as a practitioner and observer of the industry for the last 20 years, Islamic bank must be different from a commercial bank in terms of making the money as a medium of exchange and does not make the money as the commodity. This is very basis of a distinction between Islamic banking and non-Islamic banking, so to say. Islamic banking must be involved in sale, lease, investment, wakala, base contract, and so on and so forth. But not to be different in all aspects of managing these particular contracts. In the sale contract, they may agree that the bank is being exempted from the liability of the quality of the product. So they can put the disclaimer that the vehicle, the equipment that they're selling to the customer cannot be claimed against any below standard kind of product. They can transfer the risk to the ultimate buyer to recourse to the supplier in the case of less quality at the end of the day. So this is something that we have to see, and it depends in many other contracts to look into how the bank can limit the risk and transfer some of the risk to the ultimate buyer, lessee, and perhaps the other partners in the investment contract. What is important in Islamic commercial law orientation, what we call and what we term as farq mu'assir, the distinguishing element which affect the legal ruling, because not all the elements which are different could affect the legal ruling. Some of them are effective enough to produce and to induce a different legal ruling, and some of them are not that powerful enough to create a different legal ruling to make it haram or invalid from being valid. So this is something we have to see, and we have to ponder, and we cannot lump together by saying that when Islamic banking, in the case of murabaha, would ask the customer to put the wa'at to buy the commodity when the bank has bought from the supplier, or when the bank has asked the buyer to take delivery direct from the supplier, or when the bank has agreed with the supplier to deliver the asset direct to the buyer, we cannot put the Sharia construction that this is not possible because the bank has actually transferred all the risk of delivery to the customer, to the buyer. So this is something which is not new in Islamic banking, Islamic law orientation. Before we have Islamic banks in this world, in 1975, the practices of banking, of trading as they were, as it was in the past, we have so many provision allowing the buyer and seller to agree on the quantity and the quality of risk to be transferred either to one or the other, or to the third party. So this is something we have to ponder and look from the lens of the Sharia before we use our common sense of asking Islamic bank to be different on all respect, or in all respect, as in the case of a commercial bank. Interestingly, in many fatwa of Islamic banks, we are trying to put a very strict requirement for Islamic bank to be a real trader. In the case of parallel istisna, which is parallel to one another, many fatwa that we have seen were saying that you cannot make the two interrelated. They should be on stand-alone basis, which is good from Sharia perspective. We cannot make the success or the failure of one contract dependent and integral on the other contract to make it possible under Sharia. But some fatwa have gone a bit extra, even to disallow any interconnectivity in the contract to make a reference to the other contract, which is quite impossible to imagine, because they have to make reference to the first contract, because the second contract is based on the specification of the first contract of istisna. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, Islamic Bank, how hard they try, they cannot be a developer, they cannot be a contractor. So how can we are imposing on them to behave like one? So we have to give them the function of the developer, perhaps the financial duty of the developer, without asking them too much to become a real developer. Otherwise, this product of parallel istisna won't work, and if it were to work, it will bring higher costs and higher margin to the bank, and will make the whole financial product based on istisna and istisna muwazi, parallel istisna, not workable for all intent and purposes. I think this is something I wanted to share with you, and I wanted to conclude toward the end of the session that we have to ponder again, and when we call Islamic Bank to be different from a conventional bank, they have to be different in areas where they have to be different, to have their own color, their own entity, their own DNA of free from riba, uncertainty, gambling and speculation. But in other aspect of making Islamic financial product workable, this is the area that we have to free them and take away from them risks which might affect their margin and risk, and which might help them to continue offering Islamic financial products based on the sale contract, lease contract, and whatever contracts in the market. Thank you very much for watching me this session, and if I may take one or two questions, if any, from the audience. Otherwise, I think I have said what I intend to share with you this session. Hope everyone has some basic idea of my understanding of Islamic banking. It should be different, but it should not be different in all respects and extent. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening, and look forward to seeing everyone again next week. Thank you, and have a nice evening.